So today we have plans of reading Library Lion. This one, I know some of you guys have heard me read it to you before and some of you haven't. So those of you that have, enjoy it a second time, and those, I hope you enjoy it for the first time. But this is by Michelle Knudsen, illustrated by Kevin Hawks. Library Lion. So we're going to find out, why is there a library lion? One day, a lion came to the library. He walked right past the circulation desk up into the stacks, meaning where all the books are. And you can see this guy over here that's working the desk. We're going to learn a little bit more about him here before long. But he's working the desk that you guys would normally come up to when you're ready to check out your books. Mr. McBee ran down the hall to the head librarian's office. "Miss Merriweather," he called. "No running," said Miss Merriweather without looking up. But there's a lion in the library," said Mr. McBee. "Well, is he breaking any rules?" asked Miss Merriweather. She is very particular about rule breaking. "Well, no," said Mr. McBee, "not really." "Then leave him be." So there you're meeting Miss Merriweather and Mr. McBee, who was working the circulation desk. The lion wandered all around the library. He sniffed the card catalog. He rubbed his head against the new book collection. Then he padded over to Story Corner and went to sleep. No one was really sure what to do. There weren't any rules about lions in the library. And notice, he got comfy on a beanbag. You guys like to get comfy on the beanbags, I know. Soon it was time for story hour. There weren't any rules about lions at story hour either. The story lady did seem a little nervous, but she read out the first book's title in a good, clear voice. And the lion looked up, and the story lady kept reading. The lion stayed for the next story, and the story after that. He waited for another story, but all the children began to walk away. "Story hour is over," a little girl told him. "It's time for us to go." The lion looked at the children, he looked at the story lady, and he looked at the closed books. Then he roared very loud, and this is where some of you guys would help me, but we would do a quiet roar, remember? We'd go, roar. So, it's very apparent that the lion was enjoying story hour, and he did not want it to end. Miss Merriweather came striding out of her office. "Who is making that noise?" she demanded. "It's the lion," said Mr. McBee. Miss Merriweather marched right over to that lion. "If you cannot be quiet, you will have to leave," she said in a stern voice. "Those are the rules." And the lion kept roaring, but he sounded sad. The little girl tugged on Miss Merriweather's dress. "If he promises to be quiet, can he come back for story hour tomorrow?" she asked. The lion stopped roaring. He looked at Miss Merriweather, and Miss Merriweather looked back at him, and then she said, "Yes, a nice quiet lion would certainly be allowed to come back for story hour tomorrow. Hooray! Said the children. So I think the lion felt bad for roaring, but he didn't know what else to do. He wanted them to know he didn't want to be done. The next day, the lion came back. Well, you're early, said Miss Merriweather. Story hour is not until 3 o'clock. And the lion did not budge. Very well, said Miss Merriweather. You might as well make yourself useful. And she sent him off to dust the encyclopedias until it was time for story hour. The next day, the lion came early again. This time, Miss Merriweather asked him to lick all the envelopes for the overdue notices. This lion is turning out to be a pretty good helper. Soon the lion began doing things without being asked. He dusted the encyclopedias, he licked the envelopes, he let the small children stand on his back to reach the books up on the highest shelves. Then he curled up in Story Corner to wait for story hour to begin. So you can see here how the children were using his back to reach the books on the very top shelf, and some were using his back to just relax and read stories. But maybe that's why we don't put books on the tops of our shelves, way up high. We don't have a library lion to help you guys out. At first, the people in the library were nervous about this lion, but soon they got used to having him around. In fact, he seemed very well suited for the library. His big feet were quiet on the library floor. He made a comfy backrest for the children at story hour, and he never roared in the library again. What a helpful lion, people would say. They patted his soft head as he walked by. How did we ever get along without him? Mr. McBee scowled when he heard that. They had always gotten along fine before. No lions were ever needed. Lions, he thought. They could not understand the rules. They do not belong in a library. You can see Mr. McBee is a little upset. So if you look really closely, he's peeking out right here from the corner. He just does not like all the attention that the library lion is getting. One day, after he had dusted all the encyclopedias, licked all the envelopes, and helped all the small children, the lion padded down the hall to Miss Merriweather's office to see what else there was to do. There was still some time left before story hour. Well, hello, lion, said Miss Merriweather. I know something that you can do. You can bring me a book. Bring a book back to the stacks for me. Let me just get it down from the shelf. And so Miss Merriweather stepped upon the step stool, and the book was just out of her reach. So Miss Merriweather stood on her toes. She stretched out her fingers. Almost there, she said. Then Miss Merriweather stretched a little too far. So you can see where she's on her stool, reaching something on that very high shelf. Ouch, said Miss Merriweather softly, and she did not get up. Mr. McBee, she called after a minute. Mr. McBee. But Mr. McBee was at the circulation desk. He could not hear her calling. Lion, said Miss Merriweather, please, you need to go get Mr. McBee. So the lion ran down the hallway. No running, Miss Merriweather called after him. So here you can see her feet. She has fallen. She's on the floor and she needs help. The lion put his big front paws up on the circulation desk. He looked at Mr. McBee, and Mr. McBee said, "Go away, lion. I am busy." The lion whined as he pointed his nose down the hall towards Miss Merriweather's office. But Mr. McBee ignored him. Finally, the lion did the only thing that he could think to do. He looked Mr. McBee right in the eyes, and he opened his mouth very wide, and he roared the loudest roar he had ever roared in his life. This is very serious. He knew this was the only thing that would get Mr. McBee's attention. Mr. McBee gasped. "You are not being quiet," he said to the lion. "You're breaking the rules." So Mr. McBee walked down the hall as fast as he could. But the lion did not follow him. He had broken the rules, and he knew what that meant. He hung his head and he walked towards the doors. Mr. McBee did not notice any of this. "Miss Merriweather," he called as he walked. "Miss Merriweather, the lion broke the rules. The lion broke the rules." There you can see Mr. McBee's off to tell on Lion, and Lion is leaving. He burst into Miss Merriweather's office, but she wasn't in her chair. "Miss Merriweather?" he asked. "Sometimes," said Miss Merriweather on the floor from behind her desk, "there is a good reason to break the rules, even in the library. So now please go call the doctor. I think I have broken my arm." So Mr. McBee ran to call the doctor. "No running," Miss Merriweather called after him. So there she lay. She has fallen and she needs help. The next day, things were back to normal. Almost. Miss Merriweather's left arm was in a cast. The doctor had told her not to work too hard. "Well, then I will have Lion help me," Miss Merriweather thought. But the lion did not come to the library that morning. At 3 o'clock, Miss Merriweather walked over to the story corner, and Story Lady was just beginning a story for the children. And Lion was not there either. So here you can see Miss Merriweather is checking out Story Hour to see if Lion could be there. She was very confused why he hadn't shown up. People in the library even kept looking up from their books and their computer screens, hoping they would see a familiar furry face. But the lion did not come that day either. The lion did not come the next day or the day after that. So here you can see all the children enjoying the library, but many of them look a little confused because they don't know where Lion is. So one evening, Mr. McBee stopped by Miss Merriweather's office on his way home. "Can I get you anything before I go, Miss Merriweather?" he had asked her. "No, thank you," said Miss Merriweather as she was looking out the window. Her voice was very quiet, even for the library. Mr. McBee frowned as he walked away. He thought there probably has to be something he could do for Miss Merriweather after all. So you can see she's very sad. She's missing Lion. So Mr. McBee left the library, but he did not go home yet. He walked around the neighborhood. He looked under the cars. He looked behind bushes. He even looked in backyards, opened up trash cans, and looked up in tree houses, but still no lion. And you'll notice in these pictures, it's a rainy day. And so a lot of times the author will communicate with you, the reader, when there's rain, something sad is happening. So finally he circled all the way back to the library, and the lion was sitting outside looking through the glass doors. "Well, hello, Lion," said Mr. McBee, and Lion did not turn around. "I thought you might like to know," said Mr. McBee, "that there's a new rule at the library. No roaring allowed unless you have a very good reason. Say, if maybe you're trying to help a friend who's been hurt, for example." The lion's ears twitched. He turned around, but Mr. McBee was already walking away. Can you see Lion's reflection in the glass door? You can tell he's been sitting in the rain for a while. The next day, Mr. McBee walked down the hall to Miss Merriweather's office. "What is it, Mr. McBee?" asked Miss Merriweather in her new, sad, quiet voice. "I thought you might like to know," said Mr. McBee, "that there's a lion in the library." Miss Merriweather jumped from her chair. She ran down the hallway, and Mr. McBee smiled. "No running," he called after her, and Miss Merriweather did not listen. You can see in this picture her cast from her broken arm. Sometimes there was a good reason to break the rules, even in the library. So we can see here that all the kids are celebrating that Lion came back, and Miss Merriweather is giving Lion a big hug. So that is the end of our story for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and until the next time, we'll see you again.